Before we get into the objectives and one-to-one guidance for one-to-one aids and extra adult support, we're going to talk a little bit about the programming move, just to make sure that we are sending a consistent message to families.
So just real quickly, for program moves, and this affects all levels, elementary, middle school, high school, the district has been meeting for over a year and a half now with several departments, Office of School Support, OSS, Transportation. We've had legal involved, we've had compliance involved. So this was the year where we had to make some of those program moves, and we understand that some of those discussions have been very difficult with your families, and we're working with some of those families as well. But we want to make sure that you all understand, because it's important for you all to have that information, because sometimes you're the ones that are doing the transition meetings. So the idea is to make sure that we have programs available for our students in a regional alignment and a matriculation alignment as far as elementary, middle to high school. They have that right. And so in working with several of those departments, we looked at the district on a district-wide basis as far as where those programs are and how those programs can shift so that students are able to go to their closest school. Most of the time they are zoned, not all the time for those schools. So when we talk about elementary to middle to high school, that's important for those students to make sure that they're with their peers. So David's going to go into a little bit more in depth as far as the details, walk through some of the letters that you have been given. And then if you have questions about these program moves, please reach out to myself or to David, and we will get those questions answered. We've had phone calls and meetings with parents, so we understand what you're going through. So we want to make sure that we're providing that support and those answers to you.
So in the past 2 weeks, I've been meeting either on the phone or in person with several parents that are upset. I'm sure you've seen them, and it's fine for you guys to be the first line. Obviously, they're gonna they want to know who's going to let my child stay at the school. So a couple of things. If you still have a program there, but a child moves, you can offer a zone. So the messaging is that if you're a K-6 school, and a student is in 5th or 6th grade, you may, if you choose to give them a zone variance, we will still provide that transportation. If they are in, what? Okay, there were letters that were sent out in February. What?
It said it may not be provided anymore.
Okay, so I'll go through some of those things. Like, just so that you're hearing it, if you're a K-6 school, 5th or 6th grade, if you're going to offer a zone variance, transportation would be provided. If they're in the earlier grade, and obviously if you're a K-5 school, the last 2 grades, if they're in 4th or 5th grade in those schools, the same thing. You would offer, if you offer a zone variance, transportation would be provided. If they're in K1, 2, 3, or 4, you still may offer a zone variance. However, transportation most likely wouldn't be provided. There have been some cases, I kind of look at, like I had a parent said that their child has already been to 3 schools. The new school would be a 4th school. So we kind of looked at that and the fiscal impact, meaning transportation. So this student, there was a bus that was going to go in the same route. So there was a minimal fiscal impact. So in that case, I worked with that parent and we said that we would provide the transportation for that student. But that's truly a case-by-case basis and we can't guarantee it. Now in one of the letters that went to you, it said transportation and variances for students in earlier grades will not be allowed as it is not a reasonable expectation to continue to provide transportation to school outside their zone areas and neighborhoods. So I think the intent of that was not necessarily the zone variance. Obviously, it's up to you to give a zone variance or not. So it wouldn't be transportation and zone variances. The intent is more about transportation with those students in the earlier grades, right? So I just want to make that discrepancy where you can, no one's saying that you can't give a zone variance. You choose to do it, you want to look at your programming and everything that goes with that, but no one's going to say yay or nay for giving a zone variance or not a zone variance to those students. Yeah.
So you're talking about only if your program has moved, but what if you exit a student from your program and they want to stay at your home school, but they're no longer in a special program, can they still get transportation? No. If you take a variance? No.
So we are still working with families. I mean, some of you don't even have the programs at your school anymore, and I mean, those are the parent meetings that we've been doing for the past week. At this point, we are moving programs, so that's not going to change. What might change is the question is what will happen if a school that already has 2 programs, if they trigger a third allocation, or if they trigger a third allocation, we'll be working with area suits to decide where would that third program go. But at this point, programs are moving, transition meetings should be had, reaching out to families just to ensure that there will be minimal impact to students. So those are our programming. Any questions about that? Yes.
I understand about the, the elementary piece, a 6th grader in middle school, in terms of transportation. Will they still get transportation staying in the middle school with a variance? Or is that a case by case?
I think that would be more a case by case, and we could talk about that, specifically about that. We're going to look at, first of all, where is what is their zone high school? Our goal long term is that every high school has a program so they could go with their neighborhood kids. But I would say that would be case by case, and reach out to me and we can talk about
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, other business notes. Before we start on the one-to-one document, aversive restraints. We have money to pay teachers 1 hour stipend to take the training before or after contract time. So you can work with your instructional coordinator to schedule training if you need that. So we still have money for that. So reach out to them if you still feel like there's a need at your school. All right. So today we're going to talk about one-to-one aid. So we have advocates, ones that will remain nameless, that they have 2 big things they always ask for. One, I want a one-on-one aid, I want a BCBA, right? So we really wanted to give guidance to you today about really one-to-one aid and really looking at extra adult support for students, because there would be a difference. So we're going to go through some legal cases that will support some of it, and some will not support some of it. So we're going to dig into our one-to-one document. So our instructional coordinators you should have on your table 3 documents: the one-to-one document, the FADE plan, and then student profile. So the goals for our meeting, one is we're going to identify one-to-one or adult support is needed, gain an understanding of the law driving one-to-one adult support decisions, understand the requirements of our new consent for evaluation, review prior written notices, and then also review changes to our matriculation document. So does everybody have all the forms that you need on your table? If not, raise your hand and then we'll make sure you get it. Make sure you have everything you need. All right, so before we start the video, I've had run-ins with an advocate who says students should have a one-to-one aid because throughout their life they're going to have a one-to-one aid, even when they're old. They'll have a job coach or they'll have someone with them. And that's why you shouldn't deny a student to be in the gen ed with a one-to-one aid. And, that's what I hear a lot. I'm sure many of you, as your LEAs, have had run-ins with similar advocates that might ask for the same thing. So our perspective has always been a one-to-one aid is extremely restrictive. Extra adult support might not be if we're fading out that support throughout the year or throughout a couple of years. So what I want you to do, we're going to watch this video. It's a very short video. And then I want you to just talk at your tables about maybe the video and then the impact of a one-to-one aid with it. All right, take 1 minute at your table and just talk about, have you ever seen an aide, maybe not to that extent, but really have taken the role like we've seen in the video just now. And talk about possibly like what that impact on students are. So take 1 minute. All right, let's get gathered back in time. Does anyone want to share? Has anyone, probably not to that extent, but have you ever seen an aide do things for students that really the students should be doing for themselves? Raise hands. Anybody? Angie, do you want to just talk about, like, you didn't raise your hand? No? All right, I will share. When I was the school principal, I actually had several conversations with our aides about they would go and get the food from the students in the lunchroom, they would open the bags for them without even letting students have any productive struggle, right? Academically, see it all the time too, where the aide is on top of the student, basically doing hand over hand. Now, is that appropriate? I don't know. I mean, you have to look at the IEP goals, but typically it's not. So when we talk about the one-to-one aid or extra adult support, it is the most restrictive, that we have. What we're trying to avoid is what we saw in the video. Our goal is independence of students. In IEP meetings, that's the message that we send of how are we fostering independence. A one-on-one or extra adult support might be appropriate, but the conversation revolving around how are we going to foster independence needs to be had. So for the next activity, Troy and I are going to facilitate. We want you to take about 10 minutes and look through the one-to-one guidance. You're not going to be able to read the entire document. It's several pages, but kind of skim through it. Look at the court cases that support one-to-one assistance and not, and then we'll have a quick activity for us to delve deeper into the document to get a good understanding of one-to-one, extra adult support, no support at all later on. So we're going to take 10 minutes. At 9:40, we'll gather back. Before we get into the activity, is there any questions that arose when you were reading the document? Obviously, you're going to want to take some time. There's a lot of great resources in the back that we're going to want to use when extra adult support or one-to-one is needed. But any questions before we're not to get the second part?
Yeah, I'm guessing what
All right, good morning, everybody. Real quick, I want to emphasize some of the points that David made, that as a district, we know we're going to see a lot of advocates and parents who think we absolutely need a one-to-one. But as he said, we know that that is absolutely the most restrictive environment. And I also want to emphasize that not only is it a huge cost issue, and it seems like such an easy thing to say, we can get this parent to quiet down and this advocate to quiet down if we just give them a one-to-one aid. But I think what we all need to be reminded of is the long-term effects that we're creating for that student if we provide that one-to-one, and it becomes, like David said, that person who hovers over them, who all of a sudden now they're going to them for instruction, they're looking for them to start their work, and you really create like a long-term deficit. And actually, in those cases, it can be considered denial of faith when we don't create that independence. So some things to think about with the idea of one-to-one. There are times, and safety is one of them. We often have teachers get hit, and that's very unfortunate. But one or two events, we shouldn't be looking at, oh, we need one-to-one. We are talking a one-to-one is only when it's consistently, daily, and it's arbitrary. Also, obviously, a one-to-one, there are medical situations where it is so acute with the medical condition that we are not going to chance it, that we want to have a one-to-one person there at all times because the student is so fragile. But in most other cases, our obligation is going to be to do everything else first, collect that data, put a plan in place to curb those behaviors. And so David's going to share a little bit more about what we want to do as a district instead of the one-to-one aids.
So extra adult support or additional adult assistance, however you want to word it. So really our plan, our goal would be this, that schools add up the minutes that they need extra adult support for their students. So let's just say, a school comes up and says, we've added it up and we need 1,000 minutes of extra adult support. That would equal into assistance. So, whatever 1,000 would equal, that might be 5 assistants. And then you're able, as the principal, to utilize them to support your students. So that is our long-term vision. We're nowhere near that because we have such a high amount right now of one-to-one aides in schools. I was in one classroom where I think there were more adults in the room than students in the room, where it could easily have been accomplished, the goals of the teacher, if you didn't have that many adults. And ideally, if you're a principal, you have other needs within your school that you could pull that aid, or extra adult assistance for someone else. So, our rule of thumb is, my first question I always ask is, does the student need an adult with them from the minute they get off the bus until they go home? And if you truly have data to say yes, because of behavior, because of medical, that's a one-on-one aid. If not, then we should be trying to identify when that student needs support. Is it during transition from the lunchroom back to the classroom? Is it during, reading, but really being specific? Typically, students don't need, during the whole group instruction, that much assistance. But when it's independent practice or group practice, they might need extra support. So that's where IDP teams are going to be identifying where and when that support is needed. And maybe it is in only reading and not math. But that's how we want the teams to approach looking at it. Once again, we're not trying to get rid of one-on-one aids because I feel like they're appropriate in certain situations. But the conversation with the team should revolve around how much support does this student need. And Jessica's going to later get it. If we do choose that, how are we fading out that support? So if a student needs that much support year after year after year, then maybe the environment is wrong, or maybe we're not implementing something we should be implementing, be it a behavior plan or not. We should be fading that support out at some point. The one-to-one aid, most of the time you're not going to fade that out, especially if it's medical and it's degenerative, right? They're only going to get, worse as time goes on, they're going to need that. So I just think it needs to be a conversation among the team. And I know many times you have advocates bullying you into saying, well, they just need this to have a free and appropriate education. That's not really true, and exactly what Troy said, there are times that we're not providing them faith because we've provided this adult to be with them for so much and no independence has been gained during that time. So the next activity, what we're going to have you do is go through, we're going to give you some student profiles. You're going to read through the student profile. We want to be able to identify one, is it one-on-one extra adult, and that will be one, or do they not need it at all during that time? So if you were the IEP team, what would you suggest as an IEP team? There are two cases that I want you to focus on when you're doing it. The Glendale case, so if you look on page 4, Glendale Unified School District, and on page 5, the Laney case. So these two profiles kind of align with those court cases. So read through those court cases, read through the student profile, and then be prepared to talk out in the group. So the expectation is we'll pick on some people in groups, not everybody, to explain what was your decision. Was it extra adult support, one-on-one aid, and why you chose that, or none whatsoever. Right? So we'll give you, probably you need about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, we're going to just share out real quick. So we have two cases, Johnny and Mary, I believe. It is. All right. So Johnny, everybody read through it. So we're going to have this table over here. Ruth, do you want to say what you guys decided or what you decided?
I don't think this child needs a 1-to-1 aid. I don't see where Johnny is violent or has behavior concerns. And
Can't hear. Can you give us a
I don't think Johnny needs a 1-to-1 aid.
Are we asking about this?
Yes, I do. So, does everybody agree with that? Johnny doesn't need a one-on-one aid? All right, that would be the correct answer, and that aligns with one of the cases where it said, I don't know which case that one was, but you're correct. They have 2 program aids. The student is doing fine with those aids in there. At that point in time, that student wouldn't need an aid. So great job, Ruth. All right, how about the second case, Mary? Anybody else? I'm going to call on someone, so we got like a minute left.
She doesn't need one either.
Okay. Well, how come?
There's so many people in the room. Right, and if they're just asking for her to go, I mean, perhaps because of the safety, and it's hard to tell with significant behaviors what that really looks like, but if they just are going out into art and, I can't find it, art and music, maybe additional support, but not necessarily one-to-one all day long, right?
Right. So, I mean, I would say with that one, because there are, I mean, it really defines significant behaviors in that case, but that one we would probably provide either extra adult support, probably not a one-on-one there, to address that, and then we would use the behavior plan and try to fade that out as quickly as possible, but that student does need some extra support during that time. So, great job. All right, so we're going to go on to the next piece.
Good morning. So if you can please pull out the needs assessment FADE plan. We're just going to quickly review that. I want to let you know that the reason why we did this is because we realized that we were asking everyone to collect data and to have a FADE plan, and then we didn't give a FADE plan example. So I borrowed this very heavily from Council of Exceptional Children. So I'm really excited. I think it's good, and we're going to give you a fillable one. And this will also go out in the weekly. But when we're looking at additional adult support or assistance, the goal is always that it should be temporary, that we should be moving towards independence. And so when we think about what are some of the components, and this will help you with your data collection. We need to have background information. We need to have a definition of the roles and responsibilities. So using that paraprofessional, that aid, to help in that data collection. And if you have aides or assistants in your schools, do they help with data collection? So this really will help identify what specific goals and objectives they are collecting on, so that we can collect that data to show if they're gaining independence. The FAPE plan would also have goals and objectives that are specific to what that additional adult support is using and working on. And then also describe the support, so when exactly it's needed. So if we look at this FAPE plan, you'll see here you could fill out the front information. Once we do that, it becomes an educational record, so it needs to go in the IEP. And you'll see there are several pages, and you don't have to fill out every page. This is an IEP team decision, because you may have a student that only needs support during transitions. So then you're going to look in the pages that only have transition. So, like for example, the first page, it says transitions, right? So if you have a student that requires assistance for transition times, you can also identify which specific transitions. Do they need, what level of support? Do they need a direct support? Do they need a verbal, a physical, a partial physical? I think it will help teams hone in on what exactly they need support with. And then also aligning it with what role and objective that is going to help support. And then also, so that we continually look at this and ensure that our students are moving towards independence, when are we going to look at the data and analyze how that student is doing? And then also having a plan. So I know I moved through this really quickly, but on the back page, there's an example. So you can see how it's filled out. So our plan is for the kickoff for the school year, our plan is to train teachers and aides on how to do this. Because we need to make sure that everyone this is not a mandatory document. I just think it will be an extra tool to help you collect the data and to determine when students need additional adult support.
Jessica, is this electronic?
Yes, I have. We made it fillable, so I will have that out completely next week, and then also again in the beginning of the year as we train our teachers and aides. Are there any other questions? I know I'm moving really fast. Yes.
Teachers, are you talking about all special education teachers, all teachers,
Training. So I think we were going to start with the teachers in the self-contained programs, but we'll continue to talk about it. It could be just part of our training that we do.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, this is not a mandatory exercise, it's a tool.
It's a tool.
To help the team, so they would obviously like do this before the IEP if they really feel like this. We have a general feeling the student doesn't need a 1-1A.
Right. As you read through that one-on-one guidance document, you'll see that we have several appendices. So you'll see that there's a tool to kind of figure out what does the student need. So I believe that that's Appendix 1. So these are just tools that you can use. I highly suggest this FAPE plan because when we're talking to parents and advocates that really believe that their child needs an aid, you want to have as much documented evidence that you have, like so that you can show it.
And we will ask, like when we hear from instructional coordinators that the school has now requested a 1-on-1 aid for this student, we're going to ask them to see the documents in the one-to-one document. So those are ones we definitely want you to use to identify during the IEP.
So we realize that this is I rushed through this, so if you have additional questions, you will definitely revisit this. So leave that on your exit ticket if you need some more discussion on this. So moving on, any other questions?
So if we think a student needs a one-to-one aid, this kind of is mandatory. You're going to ask to see this, correct?
Well, there's other documents. So the difference between a one-to-one is if you have a student that requires a one-to-one for medical needs or like significant serious bodily harm, you're not going to have a FAPE plan. Most likely, students that are medically fragile, you're always probably going to have a one-to-one. So that's separate from the additional adult support. That is a move to, it should be considered temporary. Our difficulty right now is that once a student gets a one-on-one aid, it's expected and it stays until high school pass.
Right.
So, Katie?
So, am I the one who's starting to message this to parents, or is there something from the district level that's going to start messaging the idea of a FAPE plan and that it's best for kids, and that kind of thing? Is that coming from you guys too, or am I the one who's introducing that to my?
Well, so from my understanding, teams are coming to the table, and certain people or advocates are bringing their own needs assessment to the table. So this one has some research background to it from CEC. So it's just another tool to help you come to the table. It will be in our procedure manual. We'll have all of these documents. I just have to update the procedure manual, so it will be in there. So, David, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is they're saying we want you to use this checklist, so we're now giving you tools to use, and that conversation is really going to come from you of just how are we going to foster independence, and how long are we looking at? I mean, we want to accomplish these goals, but we're going to look at a student shouldn't need that level of support if it's extra adult assistance throughout their years. Hopefully they're gaining some skills. So, but once again, I'm going to say it's an IEP team decision. So, yeah.
Okay, so I see the time, so I really do want to hit these three other documents really quickly. I've been working with the State Department and all of the other districts to come up with unified forms. And what we've handed out is the consent for evaluation. So your teachers and your related service providers, counselors, school sites are going to receive training on this. But it's really important that you as the LEA know what has changed. So if you look at your consent, you'll notice that it looks a lot different. It has little boxes on the side. I want to be able to roll this out about June 1st, okay? The important thing is that if you will take a kid that's going through MTSS process, and you're going to sign in for an initial evaluation, and your team decides they're only going to do health, academic, cognitive, and that's it, right? And so they start testing the parent initials, those 3 areas. They start assessing, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we need to do a speech and language assessment. You need to stop, get a new consent, initial speech and language. We cannot assess for things that we don't get permission for. Right now it's a blanket permission, and we're getting a ton of state complaints, IEEs, independent educational evaluations, and due process, because we're evaluating on a blanket. And so we cannot do this anymore. So that's what's really important. So I have a little flow chart that says if you guys feel that you need to do more assessments, stop, new consent, new prior written notice. I'm going to have a sample prior written notice for your teams so they know the wording that needs to be in there, and then we get the new consent. Now, I had a team say, that's no problem, we're going to check off everything. Okay, well, you hope to do everything, because if you don't, then they can get an IEE at our expense. So please be mindful, and I know that you're not always in on those meetings. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that this is what's coming out. Angela. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, the 45-day, the initial 45 days still counts. Laura. Nope.
sort of encompasses what?
Yes. So we worked to take that out because we don't want to be on the hook for doing a particular assessment. So it left it drop.
And are we still using this for PTRs?
Yeah.
Certified?
Yes. Yep. Okay. So let's see. How did I do that? I'm sorry. Okay. Prior written notices. I gave you a sample package. In around June, we're going to have a new prior notice that's going to have the invite on the same paper. Here's what I wanted to highlight. Those of you who I've been working with pretty tightly, you'll notice that we are really writing lengthy prior written notices, right? The key for you, you can read these examples on your own time. Do not leave a box blank. Please. Nothing is not applicable. If a parent wants a one-on-one aid and the team discusses it and we determine that it's not needed, we say, what did we consider providing a one-on-one aid? Why did we reject it? Because the data collected does not demonstrate that the student needs a one-on-one aid. So it's really important. And our office is always, I'm always happy to help you because we'd rather have a really solid PWM than not have one. Okay. Last, the matriculation document. Do you have the matriculation document?
Coming.
Okay, it's coming. So this also did go out on the deputy this week. The one you're getting has draft, but it's finalized. We took off student name at the top of it because the moment we put a student name and date of birth, it becomes an educational record. Please do not have your teachers put names on it. It's a checklist for you and your teams to know the process of how we move students from program to program. Okay? Are there...
Exactly.